What's up, pop culture detectives? Have you ever looked at the K-pop scene today and wondered why, despite hundreds of new groups debuting with insane visuals and massive budgets, the ultimate global crown still belongs to the exact same 7 guys? Are the newer generations lacking that special spark? Or is the wall built by Bangtan simply indestructible? We are diving deep into the brutal truth of the music industry. Get ready to have your mind blown because we are uncovering the unbelievable secrets of the kings who absolutely refuse to give up their throne. Here is our topic for today: refusing to step down. 7 harsh realities why the gap between BTS and other K-pop groups is still too wide. Number 7. RM, the architect of an unbreakable universe. Imagine looking at the polished, hyper-perfected landscape of modern K-pop, where every single move, blink, and breathing pattern seems meticulously calculated by a board of directors in a glass skyscraper. And then you look back at the origins of the phenomenon that broke the ceiling for all of them. The harsh reality that the industry desperately tries to ignore is that you simply cannot manufacture a mind like Kim Namjoon, our brilliant leader, RM. Let's take a trip down memory lane, way back before the sold-out Wembley stadiums, the Grammy nominations, and the global hysteria, back to the dimly lit, gritty, underground hip-hop clubs of Seoul, where a teenage prodigy known as Ranch Ronda was spitting fire and raw poetry, completely unaware that his incredibly dense, analytical brain would become the foundational blueprint for the biggest musical act on the planet. Bang Si-hyuk didn't just find a good-looking kid who could hit a note or memorize a dance routine. He found an absolute philosopher, a fiercely intelligent poet trapped in the body of a rapper who deeply understood the crushing weight of societal expectations on the youth. While other entertainment companies were busy assembling groups based on calculated visual synergy, height requirements, and synchronized acrobatics taught in grueling robotic training camps, Big Hit Entertainment made the unprecedented gamble to build an entire sprawling universe around RM's intellect. And that right there is the first uncrossable chasm between BTS and the rest of the pack. Have you ever actually sat down and dissected the intricate lyricism in tracks like Bepse, Spring Day, or Amigo? We are not talking about generic, repetitive choruses designed purely to go viral on TikTok algorithms or catchy nonsense hooks created by a committee of Western ghostwriters. We are talking about deep, cutting socio-economic commentary, brutally honest reflections on the spoon class theory that dictates South Korean society, the paralyzing nature of youth depression, and the terrifying, lonely journey of finding one's identity in a hyper-competitive capitalist world, all penned by RM himself, who boasts well over 200 credits with the Korea Music Copyright Association. This level of organic, profoundly vulnerable storytelling is exactly why millions of fans across the globe connected with them on a spiritual, life-saving level, rather than just a superficial fangirling one. The K-pop industry has spent billions trying to replicate this authenticity, hiring armies of creative directors and writers to give their new rookie groups deep lore, complex cinematic universes, and meaningful concepts. But the general public is not stupid. They can smell corporate fabrication from a mile away. You can buy the most expensive producers in Sweden, you can shoot music videos on the moon, but you absolutely cannot buy the lived experience, the tears, the sweat, and the genuine soul-bearing honesty that RM poured into legendary eras like The Most Beautiful Moment in Life, Wings, or Map of the Soul. And let's talk about the impossible, agonizing burden of his leadership, the sheer crushing gravity of standing at the podium of the United Nations Assembly, not just once, but multiple times, delivering incredibly moving speeches that resonated with seasoned world leaders and broken teenagers alike. Imagine the surreal reality of casually sitting in the Oval Office of the White House, discussing severe anti-Asian hate crimes with the President of the United States, representing an entire race and generation.
He wasn't trained in international diplomacy. He famously taught himself English by repeatedly watching Friends on DVD because his mother bought it for him. Yet he blossomed into the most powerful, articulate cultural ambassador his country has seen in a century. How can any other K-pop group's appointed leader, who was likely chosen just because they're the oldest or trained the longest, even begin to compete with that kind of historical, monumental weight? When BTS goes overseas, RM operates as the ultimate shield and sword for his 6 brothers, seamlessly translating complex cultural nuances in real time during hostile or condescending Western interviews, carrying the terrifying pressure that one single mistranslated word could cause an international scandal. Yet he does it with a charming, dimpled smile and unshakable grace. The gap widens even further into the stratosphere when you look at how he utilizes his immense astronomical wealth and global platform. Instead of just flaunting flashy sports cars, buying mansions, and showing off designer clothes on Instagram like a typical global superstar, he silently donates millions of won to preserve ancient Korean art, sponsors audio guides for national museums, and passionately champions obscure contemporary artists, proving that his dedication to artistic culture completely transcends the narrow, superficial boundaries of the pop music sphere. The harsh, undeniable reality is that modern K-pop groups are strictly structured to be perfect, flawless, untouchable idols who never make mistakes and never show ugly emotions. But RM forced the industry to allow him to be profoundly, beautifully, and sometimes messily human. This is spectacularly showcased in his breathtaking solo masterpieces, like Indigo and the critically acclaimed Right Place, Wrong Person, where he ruthlessly strips away the glossy superstar persona, burns down the idol expectations, and exposes the raw, bleeding anxieties, the existential dread, and the profound loneliness of a man in his late 20s desperately trying to figure out who the hell he is outside of the blinding, suffocating spotlight of BTS. Other groups are forced by their strict contracts to maintain the exhausting illusion of absolute perfection, which makes them shiny and attractive, but ultimately unrelatable and hollow in the long run. Whereas RM bravely invites the entire world into his chaotic, complex, and brilliant mind, creating an indestructible bond of empathy and fierce loyalty with the audience that goes way beyond music. When you have a group's foundation entirely built on that kind of monumental intellect, unwavering authenticity, and fearless vulnerability, it creates a titanium fortress that no amount of slick choreography, high-budget CGI music videos, or aggressive viral marketing campaigns from rival companies can ever hope to penetrate. The magical blueprint of BTS is fundamentally, inextricably intertwined with the very DNA of Kim Namjoon, and until the pop music industry somehow figures out how to artificially clone a visionary genius who can simultaneously dissect Carl Jung's complex psychological philosophy, write a chart-topping aggressive rap verse, and carry the heavy cultural weight of an entire nation on his shoulders without completely breaking down, that gap is going to remain a massive, terrifying, unbridgeable canyon, leaving every other group forever scrambling for second place.
Number 6. Sugar. The blood on the piano keys. The unmatched producer grit. When you look at the shiny, hyper-glamorous world of the current K-pop industry, you see a conveyor belt of flawless teenagers who've been meticulously sheltered, groomed, and spoon-fed custom-made tracks by millionaire Swedish producers since they were barely out of elementary school. But the brutal, uncomfortable reality that widens the gap into an absolute chasm is that you cannot artificially engineer the soul-crushing trauma, the desperate hunger, and the literal blood, sweat, and tears that forged Min Yugi into the musical titan known as Sugar. Let us strip away the glittering stadium lights and the custom Dior stage outfits for a second and drag you back to the freezing, unforgiving streets of Daegu, where a young, fiercely stubborn kid known as Gloss was hustling in the underground hip-hop scene, desperately trying to sell his self-produced beats just to afford a single bowl of cheap noodles, constantly forced to make the agonizing daily choice between paying for a bus ride home or having dinner because he literally could not afford both. While modern entertainment companies spend millions fabricating edgy, struggling artist backstories for their newly debuted rappers, dressing them in expensive streetwear and giving them fake tattoos to make them look tough, Yoongi's scars are agonizingly, permanently real. We are talking about a boy whose early lyric notebooks were completely destroyed because his family initially opposed his impossible dreams. A boy who moved to Seoul with absolutely nothing, living in a cramped, moldy dormitory while secretly working a grueling, dangerous part-time job as a delivery boy in the dead of night just to pay his tuition fees. The K-pop industry desperately wants to sell you the illusion of a perfect, magical fairy tale, but they absolutely terrified of acknowledging the gritty truth of what happened on that rainy street when a car smashed into Yoongi's motorcycle, shattering his shoulder, an injury he desperately hid from Big Hit Entertainment in sheer, paralyzing terror that they would immediately kick him out of the debut lineup for being defective. He didn't just endure the agonizing physical pain of a dislocated joint for years, silently popping painkillers before executing flawless, punishing choreography on world stages. He endured a catastrophic psychological battle that birthed his raw, unfiltered alter ego, August D. Here lies the insurmountable difference between BTS and the rest of the pack. When other idols had given sanitized, heavily censored scripts to talk about overcoming obstacles with a shiny smile, Yoongi ruthlessly kicked the door down on the most massive taboo in South Korean society, mental health. Have you ever truly listened, and I mean deeply, uncomfortably listened, to tracks like The Last or Amygdala? This man aggressively ripped his own chest open for the entire world to see, violently exposing his battles with severe depression, crushing social phobia, obsessive-compulsive disorder, and the harrowing, suffocating nights spent locked inside a psychiatric ward bathroom, turning his deepest, darkest traumas into universally healing masterpieces. You simply cannot fake that level of visceral, spine-chilling authenticity. A corporate boardroom cannot sit down and say, hey, let's give our new rookie rapper a severe trauma concept so he goes viral. The general public instantly connects with Yoongi because his pain is indisputably real, and his survival is nothing short of miraculous, making his astronomical success feel incredibly earned and deeply personal to millions of fans who have fought the exact same demons in the dark. But the gap doesn't just stop at his tragic backstory. It explodes into the stratosphere when you examine his terrifyingly vast, undisputed genius as a producer. Mean PD is not just an idol who occasionally writes a catchy hook or tweaks a melody. He is the absolute foundational backbone of BTS's musical evolution and a highly sought-after hitmaker who has completely monopolized the global music scene, transcending the K-pop label entirely to become a peer amongst international legends. While other group members are desperately fighting for line distributions and songs they didn't even write, Yoongi is casually hanging out in his Genius Lab studio, actively producing chart-topping, multi-platinum hits for global icons like Coldplay, Halsey, Juice WRLD, and Psy, not to mention dominating the Korean charts with collaborations featuring legendary artists like IU and Epic High. He didn't just adapt to the music industry, he bent it completely to his will, proving time and time again that his musical intuition is flawlessly lethal. And if you ever needed undeniable, earth-shattering proof that the gap is still too wide to cross, you only need to look at his historic, monumentally successful D-Day solo world tour. While most K-pop solo concerts rely heavily on extravagant backup dancers, massive, distracting CGI screens, and controversial, heavily layered backing tracks,
tracks to hide vocal exhaustion, Yoongi confidently stepped onto those massive arena stages, armed with nothing but a microphone, a piano, an acoustic guitar, and his raw, unadulterated rage, completely commanding the attention of tens of thousands of screaming fans through sheer dominating stage presence and elite breathless rapping. Watching him physically break down and sob uncontrollably on stage while singing Snooze, a song specifically written as a comforting, heartbreaking lullaby to the struggling junior idols who are currently being chewed up and spit out by the exact same ruthless industry that almost broke him, was a masterclass in pure, unmanufactured humanity that no other artist in the industry has ever dared to replicate. He has become the ultimate, untouchable role model for an entire generation of trainees, the living embodiment of surviving the darkest depths of hell and emerging with a crown of gold. And until rival agencies can somehow magically conjure a producing prodigy who has literally bled for his art, battled his own mind to a standstill, and possesses the ruthless, razor-sharp ability to perfectly capture the existential dread of modern society in a single hip-hop verse, the staggering, terrifying gap between BTS and the rest of the K-pop industry will forever remain completely and utterly unbridgeable.
Number 5. J-Hope, the terrifying perfection of the dance captain. When you casually scroll through the endless ocean of modern K-pop music videos and weekly music show performances, it is incredibly easy to be momentarily blinded by the razor-sharp, knife-like synchronization and the gravity-defying acrobatic stunts executed by the newest generation of rookie idols. But the brutal, unapologetic reality that the entire industry is terrified to admit is that there is a colossal, universe-sized difference between a manufactured idol who has been mechanically drilled to memorize a routine in a sterile practice room and a true blood-and-bone street dance prodigy who literally breathes, bleeds, and speaks through the rhythm of the music. And his name is Jungkook. To truly understand why the performance gap between BTS and absolutely every other group on the planet is still terrifyingly wide, we have to aggressively rip away the shiny, cheerful sunshine persona that he so generously gifts to the cameras and look at the intimidating, relentless perfectionist known behind closed doors as the official dance leader of the biggest band in the world. Long before the private jets, the billion-dollar company valuations, and the sold-out stadium tours that literally cause minor seismic earthquakes, Hoseok was already a legendary, feared name in the gritty, highly competitive underground street dance scene of Gwangju, dominating brutal freestyle battles with his crew, Neuron, purely fueled by an explosive, innate passion for hip-hop culture that cannot ever be taught in a corporate idol training camp. While rival entertainment agencies desperately scour the country looking for pretty faces with a vague sense of rhythm that they can mold into heavily auto-tuned main dancers through years of grueling robotic repetition, Big Hit Entertainment struck absolute gold by securing a kid who already had the organic, untouchable soul of a seasoned performer, a visionary who intimately understood the microscopic details of popping, locking, and isolating muscles to the exact millisecond of a beat. This is the crushing reality that leaves other groups suffocating in the dust. J-Hope isn't just following the choreography, he is the undisputed commander of it, serving as the terrifyingly strict, eagle-eyed drill sergeant who has spent the last decade painstakingly agonizing over every single angle, every single fingertip placement, and every single millimeter of spacing for all 7 members, transforming a ragtag group of underground rappers and untrained vocalists into the most universally feared and respected performance powerhouse in the history of the music industry. You can vividly see this terrifying, awe-inspiring dedication in the legendary dance practice videos, where his playful smile instantly vanishes, replaced by a chilling, laser-focused death glare that demands absolute, unwavering perfection from his brothers, pushing them through agonizing 10-hour rehearsals until their lungs are burning and their bodies are pushed far beyond the absolute limits of human endurance, proving that their synchronized miracles on stage are not the result of digital editing or clever camera angles, but of literal blood, sweat, and excruciating tears. But the gap widens from a canyon into an unfathomable abyss when you look at how he completely shatters the restrictive, suffocating boundaries of being just a K-pop dancer to become an earth-shattering, history-making solo headliner. Let's talk about the absolute cultural reset that was Lollapalooza 2022, affectionately dubbed Hoppypalooza by the millions of people who witnessed it, where he made monumental history as the very first South Korean artist to ever headline a major United States music festival. He didn't hide behind the safety net of his 6 members. He didn't rely on flashy, distracting CGI backgrounds or heavily pre-recorded backing tracks to mask vocal exhaustion like so many other idols do. He stepped onto that massive Chicago stage completely alone, armed with nothing but a live rock band, a raw, unfiltered microphone, and an indescribable magnetic aura that effortlessly commanded the undivided attention of over 100,000 screaming fans for 90 exhausting adrenaline-fueled minutes. With his critically acclaimed, brilliantly dark solo masterpiece, Jack in the Box, he violently burned down the industry's expectation that he would just release a bubbly, safe pop album, instead diving headfirst into gritty 90s old-school hip-hop, grunge, and raw psychological storytelling, exposing the suffocating pressure, the burning ambition, and the terrifying shadows of his own mind in tracks like Arson and more. This level of artistic risk-taking is completely alien to the current K-pop landscape, where companies are terrified of letting their idols deviate even an inch from the mathematically calculated, algorithm-friendly formulas designed to maximize TikTok trends and physical album sales. Other main dancers in the industry are completely trapped in their designated boxes, only allowed to shine during 30-second dance breaks before fading back into the background. Whereas J-Hope is a monstrous 3-threat chameleon who flawlessly transitions from spitting aggressive, lightning-fast rap verses to delivering breathtaking, emotional vocal harmonies to executing bone-shattering choreography without ever dropping a single drop of sweat or missing a single breath. The sheer, terrifying magnitude of his stage presence is so overwhelming that even legendary Western artists and seasoned music critics are left completely speechless, recognizing that his ability to physically embody the very essence of music is a once-in-a-generation phenomenon. He carries the agonizing, monumental burden of being the eternal hope for millions of fans, constantly smiling and radiating positivity, even when his own body is breaking down from exhaustion, sacrificing his own spotlight countless times to elevate his members. Yet when it is his time to shine, he devours the stage with a primal, hungry ferocity that leaves absolutely no survivors. Until the massive corporate machines of the K-pop industry can figure out how to artificially manufacture a human being who possesses the authentic, gritty soul of an underground street dancer, the terrifying, meticulous discipline of a military general, the versatile genius of a chart-topping producer, and the humble, bleeding heart of a true artist who views the stage as his sacred sanctuary rather than just a place to look cool, the astronomical, breathtaking gap established by Jungkook will remain completely and permanently untouched, leaving every single rival group forever chasing a shadow they can never, ever catch.
Number 4. Jin, the unbreakable silver voice, the hidden anchor of Bangtan. When you plunge headfirst into the aggressively visual-obsessed, superficial realm of the modern K-pop industry, it is practically a standard corporate mandate that every single debuted group must have a designated visual member, a breathtakingly handsome face strategically placed in the center of the formation to secure brand endorsements, attract casual fans, and trend on social media algorithms. But the harsh, unapologetic reality that completely shatters this shallow industry standard is the monumental, agonizing evolution of Kim Sok-jin, a man who absolutely refused to be reduced to just a pretty face in a multi-billion-dollar machine. Have you ever truly stopped to wonder what it actually takes to be plucked right off the street while simply getting off a bus, armed with absolutely zero singing or dancing experience because your only dream was to be an actor, and then suddenly being thrust into a suffocating, hyper-competitive basement with underground hip-hop prodigies and fiercely trained street dancers? The terrifying, unbridgeable gap between BTS and the rest of the manufactured pop music machine lies precisely in the unseen, blood-stained, tear-soaked hours that Jin spent desperately fighting to catch up to the rest of his members, a grueling, lonely battle of sheer willpower that most newly debuted idols would completely crumble under within a week. While other entertainment companies are perfectly content to let their visual members lip-sync through complex routines and hide behind heavy robotic auto-tune or the overpowering voices of their main vocalists, Jin ruthlessly locked himself in vocal training rooms until his throat was raw and his vocal cords were practically bleeding, meticulously transforming his completely untrained voice into the undeniable crystal-clear silver voice that serves as the breathtaking, emotional climax of BTS's entire discography. You cannot simply manufacture the spine-chilling, soaring high notes he flawlessly belts out while executing exhausting choreography in tracks like Crystal Snow, Dionysus, or Fake Love, nor can a corporate boardroom artificially engineer the profound, gut-wrenching vulnerability he pours into his absolute solo masterpieces like Epiphany, Awake, and Abyss, where he bravely strips away the glittering, confident, worldwide handsome persona to expose his deepest insecurities, his imposter syndrome, and his desperate, burning desire to be recognized as a true artist rather than just an attractive idol whose only job is to look good for the cameras. The K-pop industry is fundamentally built on rigid, inescapable hierarchies, especially regarding the strict Confucian age dynamics in South Korea, where the eldest member typically rules with an iron fist, demanding absolute obedience and respect from the younger trainees. But here is where Jin completely rewrote the rulebook and cemented a gap so wide it is practically a different universe altogether. Instead of wielding his age as a weapon of authority or distancing himself from the struggles of the younger members, he willingly shattered the traditional hierarchy, intentionally acting silly, throwing ridiculous dad jokes, and physically humbling himself just to make his younger brothers laugh and feel utterly safe in an industry that constantly tries to tear them apart piece by piece. Can you even begin to fathom the immense, crushing psychological weight of being the eldest pillar of the biggest musical act in human history, silently absorbing the stress, the panic attacks, and the terrifying existential dread of 6 younger men who were thrust into a level of global fame that no one on earth could have ever prepared them for? It was Jin who bravely stepped up to the microphone during the universally infamous, tear-drenched 2018 Mnet Asian Music Awards speech, shocking the entire world by confessing that the group had suffered such severe mental breakdowns that they were on the absolute brink of disbanding. A moment of raw, uncalculated honesty that would absolutely terrify modern K-pop CEOs who strictly force their idols to maintain an illusion of unbreakable, smiling perfection 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. This staggering level of emotional intelligence, selfless sacrifice, and quiet, unyielding resilience is the invisible titanium glue that has kept BTS from shattering under the blinding, radioactive pressure of global superstardom, and it is a quality that absolutely cannot be taught in a vocal lesson or a dance practice room. And let us not dare forget the monumental, terrifying burden he carried as the very first member to face the dreaded South Korean mandatory military enlistment, stepping away from the absolute pinnacle of global success, cutting off his hair and walking into the freezing, punishing winter of the frontline training camp with the eyes of the entire world and the relentless scrutiny of the government intensely watching his every single move. He didn't just survive it, he completely dominated it, earning the prestigious rank of an elite special class warrior and an assistant drill instructor, proving that his relentless work ethic and mental fortitude extend far beyond the glittering confines of a concert stage, while the rest of the industry nervously watches their own idols try to delay or navigate enlistment with nowhere near the same level of universally respected grace. When he finally returned, instead of resting, he immediately threw himself back into exhausting, chaotic schedules, hosting massive hugging events for thousands of fans just a day after his discharge, carrying the Olympic torch in Paris, and releasing his triumphant solo music, effortlessly reminding the world that his star power is absolutely untarnished and infinitely enduring. The harsh reality is that modern K-pop agencies are desperately trying to clone the visual appeal and the quirky charm of Jin, giving their rookies pre-written jokes and heavily scripted caring Hyung moments for their reality shows. But the public sees right through the plastic facade. You cannot fake a decade of silent, agonizing sacrifice. You cannot artificially train a voice to carry the desperate hopes of millions. And you absolutely cannot mass-produce a man who willingly became the invisible, unbreakable foundation for 6 other legends to stand on. Until rival companies figure out how to organically cultivate a human being who possesses the breathtaking beauty of a movie star, the soaring, crystalline vocal range of a seasoned theatrical belter, and the deeply profound, protective soul of a self-sacrificing older brother who would literally walk through hellfire to keep his family together, the staggering, intimidating gap left by Kim Sok-jin will forever remain a towering, impenetrable fortress that no other group can ever hope to conquer.
Number 3. Jimin, the swan who bled for perfection, the gravity-defying artistry of Park Jimin. When you blindly consume the incredibly fast-paced, easily digestible, and heavily mathematically calculated 15-second TikTok dance challenges that have absolutely infected and overtaken the entire modern K-pop industry, it is remarkably easy to forget what true, unadulterated, highbrow artistry actually looks like when it is unleashed on a global stage. But the harsh, terrifying reality that separates BTS from the absolute rest of the manufactured pack is the existence of a human being who literally bleeds art from his pores, the ethereal and completely unmatched Park Jimin. To truly comprehend the astronomical, mind-bending gap between his mesmerizing stage presence and the stiff, robotic execution of newer generations of idols, you have to aggressively rewind the clock and look at the prestigious, highly elite halls of the Busan High School of Arts, where Jimin wasn't just another student with a vague dream of being famous, but rather the undisputed top student in the entire modern dance department, a breathtakingly rare prodigy whose classical teachers literally begged him on their hands and knees not to throw his once-in-a-lifetime generational talent away to join a nearly bankrupt, obscure entertainment company in Seoul. The agonizing truth that rival agencies desperately try to hide from their polished documentaries is that you simply cannot take a teenager off the street, put them through a generic corporate dance camp, and expect them to suddenly possess the devastating, soul-crushing emotional depth required to execute contemporary ballet intertwined with aggressive street hip-hop, a hybrid style that Jimin entirely invented and completely monopolized. But the journey to becoming the undisputed it boy of South Korea was paved with unimaginable, terrifying psychological torture and physical agony, because the devastating reality of his trainee days was that Big Hit Entertainment almost mercilessly kicked him out of the final debut lineup a staggering 8 separate times, simply because his fluid, delicate, and breathtakingly elegant contemporary dance lines drastically clashed with the heavy, aggressive, underground hip-hop image the company was initially forcing upon the group. Can you even begin to fathom the sheer suffocating panic and the paralyzing desperation of a young teenager completely separated from his family, sleeping a maximum of 2 hours a night in a cramped, mold-infested practice room, desperately forcing his body to unlearn years of elite classical training just to survive the brutal, cutthroat monthly evaluations? And let us aggressively address the devastating, heartbreaking physical sacrifices he made to fit into the insanely toxic, unforgiving beauty standards of the idol industry, enduring incredibly dangerous starvation-level diets during the blood, sweat, and tears era, literally surviving on a single meal for days on end and physically passing out during grueling dance rehearsals just to achieve a jawline sharp enough to satisfy the ruthless, unforgiving cameras.
This excruciating, self-inflicted pursuit of absolute, terrifying perfection birthed an artist whose stage presence is so overwhelming, so violently captivating, that he can literally make an entire stadium of 80,000 people hold their collective breath simply by extending his fingertips, as seen in the legendary, earth-shattering 2018 Melon Music Awards, where he performed a traditional Korean fan dance that was so culturally significant and visually spellbinding that he received an official plaque of appreciation from the South Korean government. While modern entertainment machines are busy hiring the most expensive choreographers in Los Angeles to create trendy point moves that will look good on a smartphone screen, Jimin transforms the stage into a sacred theatrical sanctuary, treating every single performance of Black Swan as if he is a literal dying bird, aggressively contorting his spine, snapping his joints, and pouring such a raw, visceral level of agonizing heartbreak into his movement that it transcends the very concept of pop music and enters the realm of elite, untouchable fine art. But the uncrossable chasm doesn't just end with his gravity-defying body. It extends into the stratosphere with his impossibly unique, completely unreplicable, and beautifully androgynous vocal timbre, a breathtaking countertenor voice that weaves seamlessly through the complex, heavy bass lines of BTS's discography, providing the crucial, soaring, emotional climax that completely defines their signature sound. You can hire all the elite vocal coaches in the world to teach a rookie idol how to hit a high note, but you absolutely cannot teach them how to inject the desperate, pleading vulnerability heard in solo masterpieces like Lie or the intoxicating, seductive whisper of Filter. And if anyone dared to question the monumental, terrifying magnitude of his individual power, Jimin completely shattered the global music industry with his critically acclaimed solo album Face, completely obliterating history by becoming the very first South Korean solo artist to ever debut at #1 on the notoriously gate-kept, heavily Western-biased Billboard Hot 100 chart with his synth-pop masterpiece Like Crazy. Achieving this unfathomable milestone entirely through organic, terrifyingly massive fan demand without the crutch of massive radio airplay, playlisting deals, or a strategic Western artist feature that other K-pop companies literally beg and pay millions for. He brutally exposed the raw, suffocating isolation and the terrifying loss of identity he experienced during the pandemic, stripping away the glamorous idol persona to reveal the incredibly scarred, fiercely resilient man underneath, screaming his lungs out alongside a massive choir in the aggressive, spine-chilling anthem, Set Me Free. The harsh, undeniable reality that leaves every single rival CEO shaking in their expensive suits is that you cannot artificially manufacture the intoxicating, lethal duality of Park Jimin, a man who can be the softest, most comforting angel off stage, silently donating hundreds of millions of won to completely fund the education of underprivileged children in his hometown of Busan without ever alerting the press, yet instantly transform into a terrifying, magnetic, stage-devouring demon the absolute second the stage lights go down. Until the multi-billion-dollar K-pop machine somehow figures out how to genetically engineer a classically trained prodigy who is willing to literally bleed for his art, who possesses a voice that sounds like shattered glass and warm honey, and who commands an organic, terrifyingly loyal global army of fans that can single-handedly rewrite the fundamental rules of the American music industry overnight, the breathtaking, unfathomable gap established by Jimin will remain an untouchable, mythical standard that the rest of the industry can only desperately and hopelessly dream of reaching.
Number 2. V. The master of the micro-expression, the velvet baritone rebel. When you casually glance at the blindingly fast, hyper-manufactured conveyor belt of the modern K-pop industry, you see entertainment companies desperately churning out hundreds of visually stunning idols every single year, trying to mathematically calculate the perfect facial ratios to capture the fleeting attention of a brutally fickle digital audience. But the harsh, unforgiving reality that completely shatters their million-dollar strategies is the existence of Kim
Kim Tae-young, a man whose sheer, suffocating aura and unparalleled artistic depth completely transcend the cheap, superficial label of a visual. To truly understand the terrifying, unbridgeable gap between V and the sea of industry clones, we have to rip away the expensive designer clothes, ignore the jaw-dropping, record-breaking Instagram titles, and travel back to the gritty, uncertain days before BTS even debuted, when Tae-young was subjected to the incredibly cruel, psychologically agonizing experiment of being the hidden member. Imagine the sheer, crushing heartbreak of a young teenager living in the exact same cramped, moldy dorms, practicing until his bones physically ached, watching his 6 brothers film vlogs and interact with early fans, while he was literally forced to hide in the corner, entirely erased from the narrative, paralyzed by the terrifying, suffocating anxiety that he might just be cut from the group at the absolute last second. This agonizing period of forced silence didn't break him. Instead, it forged an unbelievably observant, deeply emotional artist who learned to communicate his bleeding soul not through loud, desperate screams for attention, but through the microscopic, devastatingly precise shifts of his gaze. The K-pop machine loves to mass-produce upbeat, high-energy performers who smile aggressively into the camera, but Tae-young completely reinvented the global standard of stage presence by becoming the absolute, undisputed king of micro-expressions. Have you ever actually watched his legendary, history-making fan cams, like the monumental Boy with Love performance that completely shattered YouTube records with tens of millions of views? He doesn't just flawlessly execute the choreography, he acts it, violently dragging the audience into a hypnotic, theatrical trance by effortlessly flipping his aura from a sweet, endearing boy to a dangerously seductive, untouchable god within a single, terrifying millisecond. An organic, intuitive skill that rival agencies desperately try to drill into their rookies using strict, mind-numbing mirror exercises, only to end up with stiff, robotic imitations that look completely dead behind the eyes. But the gap explodes from a canyon into an absolute, unfathomable chasm when you actively listen to the very foundation of his artistry, his voice. In an industry that aggressively favors high-pitched, soaring tenors and heavily auto-tuned pop vocals specifically engineered to cut through loud, chaotic EDM beats, Tae-young possesses an impossibly rich, soulful, and breathy baritone that sounds like incredibly expensive, aged wine spilling over dark velvet. Big Hit initially had absolutely no idea what to do with his incredibly unique, deep vocal register, often forcing him to strain into uncomfortable, raspy growls in their early hip-hop tracks. But once he was finally allowed to unleash his true velvety tone in absolute, critically acclaimed masterpieces like Singularity, Stigma, and Inner Child, he completely shifted the entire sonic landscape of the group. You simply cannot manufacture the agonizing, sensual desperation he pours into Singularity, a neo-soul track so incredibly complex and mesmerizing that major Western media outlets like the New York Times boldly declared it one of the absolute best songs of the year, completely ignoring the generic, mathematically calculated pop formulas that dominate the charts. And when the time finally came for him to release his highly anticipated solo debut, while every other entertainment company would have practically forced an artist of his astronomical, record-breaking global popularity to drop a highly commercial, TikTok-friendly pop anthem with a flashy, high-budget CGI music video to guarantee an easy #1 hit, Tae-young ruthlessly flipped the middle finger to the industry algorithms and released Layover, a stunningly gorgeous, deeply nostalgic, and unapologetically slow-paced R&B and jazz-infused masterpiece. He casually brought his actual pet dog, Yeontan, onto massive music show stages instead of a massive crew of backup dancers, creating an incredibly intimate, deeply personal, and completely unpretentious atmosphere that completely baffled industry executives who were absolutely terrified of anything that doesn't scream viral dance trend. He is an old soul trapped in the body of the most photographed man on the planet, heavily influenced by obscure vintage jazz legends, classical art, and raw film photography, completely rejecting the fast-paced, disposable, and easily digestible nature of modern pop culture. The terrifying reality that keeps rival CEOs awake at night sweating is his unfathomable, completely organic global impact, literally breaking the Guinness World Record for the fastest person in human history to reach 1 million and then 10 million followers on Instagram, and crashing entire massive e-commerce websites simply by casually wearing a cheap handmade bracelet or reading an obscure, out-of-print book. He doesn't need to desperately try to be viral. His mere breathing existence is an earth-shattering event. When he casually attends a fashion show in Paris, the sheer, deafening volume of the screaming crowds literally forces the local police to completely shut down entire city blocks, instantly eclipsing seasoned Hollywood A-listers and making multi-billion-dollar luxury brands like Celine and Cartier bend over backwards just to be briefly associated with his name. Yet underneath this untouchable, godlike global superstar exterior is an incredibly eccentric, fiercely loyal, and beautifully unpredictable man who values genuine human connection and the pure, unfiltered beauty of art far above any chart record or shiny, meaningless trophy. Until the hyper-calculated, mathematically optimized K-pop industry can somehow figure out how to artificially clone a rebel who sings like a 1950s jazz legend, looks like a living, breathing Renaissance painting, possesses the terrifying ability to manipulate millions of hearts with a single lazy blink, and completely ignores every single corporate rule of the pop music game, simply to stay fiercely true to his own slow, beautifully chaotic rhythm, the staggering, intimidating gap established by Kim Tae-young will forever remain an utterly impenetrable fortress, leaving every single rival idol desperately and hopelessly trying to emulate an aura that simply cannot be bought.
Number 1. Jungkook, the unstoppable global titan, the golden Mach-9. When you aggressively analyze the meticulously calculated, highly artificial formula of the modern K-pop industry, every single company desperately places their absolute heaviest bets on their designated center, the ultimate all-rounder who is mathematically engineered to capture the public's eye, deliver the vocal climax, and execute the most grueling dance breaks. But the agonizing, universe-shattering reality that leaves every single rival entertainment agency completely paralyzed with fear is the undisputed existence of Jungkook, a human anomaly who didn't just break the industry standard, but violently obliterated it and rewrote the entire rulebook of global pop superstardom. To truly comprehend the terrifying, unbridgeable chasm between BTS and the absolute rest of the manufactured pack, you have to violently rewind the clock to a time before the billion-dollar HYBE skyscraper existed, back when a completely terrified, deeply introverted 15-year-old boy auditioned for a generic singing show and was aggressively scouted by 7 different major entertainment companies, including the absolute titans of the Big Three, who could have instantly guaranteed him a luxurious, fast-tracked path to fame and fortune. Yet, in a plot twist so completely cinematic that Hollywood screenwriters would reject it for being too unrealistic, this incredibly sought-after prodigy rejected all the massive corporate contracts and multi-million-dollar promises simply because he saw a young underground rapper named RM performing in a dusty room and thought he looked cool, willingly choosing to sign with a practically bankrupt, unheard-of agency, a monumental, history-altering decision that officially sealed the fate of the entire global music industry. The harsh, unforgiving truth that modern K-pop companies desperately try to hide from their heavily manicured trainees is that you simply cannot artificially inject a teenager with the sheer, terrifying, blood-boiling ambition required to completely carry the vocal, visual, and performance core of a struggling group while simultaneously growing up under the most aggressive, suffocating microscope of the digital age.
They gave him the incredibly heavy, suffocating title of the Golden Maknae, a moniker that would have completely crushed any other rookie idol under the paralyzing weight of impossible expectations. But Jungkook didn't just survive the pressure, he ruthlessly devoured it, locking himself in practice rooms until his lungs burned and his muscles gave out, transforming himself from a shy kid who used to cry when asked to sing in front of a small room of executives into a terrifying, stage-devouring titan who flawlessly belts out impossibly stable, crystal-clear high notes while effortlessly executing bone-shattering choreography that leaves veteran dancers completely breathless. The gap explodes from a canyon into an unfathomable, terrifying abyss when you look at his absolute, undisputed dominance as a live performer. While newer generations of idols heavily rely on backing tracks, lip-syncing, and distracting high-budget CGI to mask their exhausting, breathless routines, Jungkook treats a massive, sold-out stadium stage like it is his own personal playground, seamlessly transitioning from aggressive, underground hip-hop rapping in their early eras to delivering breathtaking, angelic vocal runs in pop masterpieces, proving time and time again that his stamina is absolutely inhuman and completely unmatched. And if the global music industry ever dared to arrogantly question whether his terrifying power was purely reliant on the massive machinery of BTS, he completely, violently silenced every single critic on the planet with his monumental, history-obliterating solo debut era, proving that he is not just a K-pop idol, but a generational global pop icon directly in the same breath as Michael Jackson or Justin Timberlake. Let us aggressively talk about 7, a massive, earth-shattering track that didn't just climb the charts, it completely broke the mathematical algorithms of Spotify, becoming the fastest song in human history to surpass 1 billion streams, aggressively debuting at number 1 on the notoriously gate-kept, heavily Western-biased Billboard Hot 100 and completely dominating the global airwaves without the massive, calculated playlisting deals that American artists rely on. He casually flew to New York City and announced a spontaneous guerrilla pop-up concert in the middle of Times Square with only a few hours' notice, completely shutting down the absolute heart of Manhattan as tens of thousands of screaming fans flooded the streets. A terrifying, awe-inspiring display of organic, undeniable superstar power that multi-billion-dollar labels can literally only dream of buying for their top-tier artists. He stood completely alone at the absolute biggest stage on planet Earth, performing the official anthem Dreamers at the opening ceremony of the FIFA World Cup in Qatar, commanding the undivided attention of billions of global viewers with such an effortless, breathtaking swagger and flawless live vocals that he instantly trended at number 1 worldwide, proving that he completely transcends the restrictive, suffocating box of the K-pop genre. With his critically acclaimed solo album Golden, he ruthlessly proved that he is the ultimate musical chameleon, seamlessly dominating heavily retro funk tracks like Standing Next to You with razor-sharp theatrical choreography, and delivering smooth, intoxicating R&B vocals in 3D, fully realizing his terrifying potential as the ultimate global main pop boy. Yet the absolute harshest reality, the true secret weapon that makes the gap between Jungkook and the rest of the industry completely impossible to cross, is his devastatingly beautiful, unapologetic humanity and his fierce, unbreakable loyalty to his roots. Despite being one of the wealthiest, most famous young men on the entire planet, he still respectfully bows exactly 90 degrees to every single staff member he meets. He physically covers his entire right arm in permanent tattoos explicitly dedicated to ARMY and his members, completely defying the incredibly strict, conservative beauty standards of South Korea. And he will casually turn on a massive live stream at 4 in the morning to 4 million people just to fold his laundry, sing karaoke in his pajamas, or literally fall deeply asleep on camera because he feels that insanely safe with his fans. While modern K-pop agencies are desperately spending millions of dollars training their idols on exactly how to act, exactly what to say, and how to maintain the perfect, untouchable superstar illusion, Jungkook completely shatters the glass ceiling by offering his raw, unfiltered, and deeply vulnerable soul, proving that the ultimate pinnacle of global success isn't achieved by being a perfectly manufactured, unfeeling corporate product, but by being an incredibly authentic, undeniably talented, and beautifully flawed human being who completely refuses to let the massive, soul-crushing music industry change who he truly is. Until rival entertainment companies can figure out how to artificially clone an untouchable prodigy who possesses the explosive, raw power of an Olympic athlete, the angelic, perfectly pitched voice of a seasoned vocal legend, the terrifying, magnetic stage presence of a history-making pop king, and the incredibly humble, bleeding heart of a boy from Busan who just really loves to sing for his fans, the massive, terrifying, and astronomical gap established by Jungkook will forever remain an absolute impenetrable fortress, solidifying BTS's eternal reign at the absolute pinnacle of music history and leaving every single rival idol completely choking on their golden dust.
So, there you have it, the raw, unfiltered, and undeniably brutal truth about why the colossal, seemingly infinite chasm between the 7 living legends of Bangtan and the relentless, hyper-manufactured conveyor belt of the modern pop music industry is not just some temporary fleeting trend, but an absolute, permanent historical reality that entire multi-billion-dollar entertainment conglomerates are absolutely terrified to publicly acknowledge. We have meticulously peeled back the incredibly glossy, superficial layers of the K-pop machine to expose the bleeding, scarred, and triumphant heart of a group that completely refused to be packaged, sanitized, and sold as mere corporate products, proving time and time again that true, earth-shattering global dominance cannot be mathematically calculated in a boardroom or engineered through a viral TikTok dance challenge algorithm. The agonizing, unapologetic reality that keeps rival CEOs violently awake at night, desperately throwing millions of dollars at elite Swedish producers, aggressive Western PR firms, and Hollywood choreographers, is the fundamental misunderstanding of what actually built the titanium fortress of BTS. They are desperately trying to clone the shiny, breathtaking end result without ever wanting to endure the horrific, soul-crushing, and near-bankrupt process that organically forged these 7 men in the absolute fires of desperation. You can easily build a massive, state-of-the-art training facility with wall-to-wall mirrors. You can hire the strictest vocal coaches on the planet to drill perfectly pitched high notes into exhausted teenagers. And you can buy the most aggressive, targeted social media marketing campaigns to artificially inflate music video views in the first 24 hours. But you absolutely cannot, under any circumstances, buy the authentic, lived trauma of starving in a moldy dorm room while desperately clinging to a shared, impossible dream. The modern K-pop industry is currently suffocating under its own desperate desire for instant, easily digestible gratification, debuting younger and younger idols who are strictly trained to never show a single ounce of negative emotion, never make a controversial statement, and never step a single millimeter outside the carefully constructed lines of their designated corporate personas, creating a vast, endless sea of beautiful but ultimately hollow performers who are easily replaced the absolute second the next shiny new group debuts. But BTS completely shattered that toxic cycle by violently forcing the industry to look at their ugly, messy, and profoundly beautiful humanity, weaponizing their deepest insecurities, their crippling anxiety, and their rawest existential dread into a universally healing discography that completely transcends language, culture, and geographical borders, creating an incredibly fierce, unconditionally loyal global army of fans who do not just passively consume their music, but actively live, breathe, and survive through it. When you actively combine the genius philosophical architecture of RM, the blood-stained, razor-sharp production grid of Suga, the terrifying, militant performance perfection of J-Hope, the unbreakable, self-sacrificing emotional anchor of Jin, the ethereal, gravity-defying classical artistry of Jimin, the hypnotic, soul-piercing micro-expressions of V, and the absolute, unstoppable, history-obliterating golden power of Jungkook, you do not
not just get a standard pop boy band, you get an incredibly rare, once-in-a-lifetime cosmic anomaly, a perfect, indestructible storm of individual prodigies who somehow managed to find each other in the darkest, most unforgiving corners of Seoul and decided to take on the entire world completely hand in hand. Even when the entire globe was thrown into the terrifying uncertainty of a pandemic, or when the group bravely stepped into their intensely scrutinized solo eras, navigating the agonizing pressures of South Korean mandatory military enlistment, they absolutely refused to lose their momentum, instead proving that their individual standalone star power is just as fiercely lethal and chart-dominating as their collective force, completely paralyzing an industry that desperately prayed their hiatus would finally give other groups a chance to breathe and catch up. As the global music industry continues to rapidly evolve, desperately trying to integrate artificial intelligence, virtual reality avatars, heavily sampled retro beats, and hyper-shortened 2-minute song lengths just to capture the fleeting, microscopic attention of the modern digital consumer, the staggering, intimidating gap established by these 7 titans only continues to widen into an unfathomable abyss, serving as a constant, brutal reminder that true, timeless artistry, genuine brotherhood, and a bleeding, organic connection with the audience still absolutely reign supreme over manufactured, disposable virality. The kings completely refused to step down because they didn't just magically inherit the throne, they built it from absolute scratch with their own blood, sweat, tears, and shattered bones, laying a philosophical and musical foundation so incredibly deep and complex that the rest of the industry is still hopelessly drowning in the shallow end of the pool, desperately trying to figure out how to swim without drowning in their own manufactured hype. The very essence of Bangtan is a masterclass in defying impossible odds, a visceral, ongoing documentary of 7 boys from outside the wealthy center of Seoul who aggressively kicked down the heavy, gate-kept doors of the Western music industry and fundamentally rewired the global pop culture ecosystem, proving that vulnerability is the ultimate superpower and that true legends are never ever made in a factory. So, as we wrap up this intense, mind-bending deep dive into the harsh, unapologetic realities of the fiercely competitive music world, we have to leave you with one final, incredibly provocative question to fiercely debate in the comments section below. As these 7 untouchable legends prepare to inevitably reunite and unleash the next highly anticipated chapter of their monumental, history-making careers, will the current hyper-saturated K-pop industry finally realize that trying to aggressively replicate the Bangtan formula is an absolute, impossible, foolish suicide mission? Or will they forever remain trapped in an agonizing, endless cycle of chasing a glorious, untouchable shadow that they can never, ever catch? Thank you so much for tuning in to this explosive, eye-opening narrative on our channel. Don't forget to fiercely hit that like button, subscribe for more brutally honest, top-tier edutainment content, and let us know which incredibly complex, mysterious pop culture phenomenon you desperately want us to mercilessly dissect and expose, because the truth is always far more terrifying and beautiful than the fiction.